Ethan Walsh had perfected the art of being invisible. At 28, he'd spent the last 3 years cleaning the executive floors of Reed Industries after hours, moving through the gleaming offices like a ghost. No one saw him. No one spoke to him beyond the occasional distracted nod from a late working associate. And that was exactly how Ethan preferred it, because being seen meant being vulnerable, and Ethan had learned the hard way that vulnerability only led to pain. He'd built his life around safety and predictability. His small studio apartment in Queens, his night shift that kept him away from crowds, his routine that never varied. He woke at 7 in the evening, ate a simple meal, took the subway to Manhattan, and spent his nights making other people's messes disappear. Then he went home, slept through the day, and did it all over again. It was lonely, yes, but it was safe. And after what happened with Marcus, after the humiliation and the heartbreak, safe was all Ethan needed. Marcus had been his college boyfriend, the golden boy who'd promised Ethan forever while secretly sleeping with half their fraternity. When Ethan finally discovered the truth, Marcus had laughed in his face and told him he'd been nothing but a convenient distraction, someone easy and available, while Marcus figured out what he really wanted. The words had cut deeper than any physical wound could have. "You're not the kind of guy people keep, Ethan. You're the kind they use until something better comes along." Those words had burrowed into Ethan's soul and taken root. He'd graduated, moved to New York to escape the memories, and slowly constructed a life where no one could hurt him because no one could get close enough to try. He went to work, he went home, and he kept his head down. The loneliness was a constant ache in his chest, but it was better than the alternative. Better than hoping and trusting and opening himself up only to be destroyed again. His job at Reed Industries was perfect for his hermit lifestyle. The building was a gleaming tower of glass and steel in Midtown Manhattan, headquarters to one of the most successful tech companies in the world. During the day, the place buzzed with hundreds of employees, deals worth millions being made, innovations being born. But at night, after 10 p.m., the building belonged to people like Ethan, the cleaners, the security guards, the invisible workforce that kept the machine running. Ethan's route took him through the lower floors first, working his way up to the executive suites on the 42nd floor. He liked the progression, starting with the cubicle farms and break rooms before ending his shift in the pristine offices of the leadership team. There was something satisfying about the executive floor, the way everything was so carefully curated, expensive art on the walls, designer furniture, that intangible sense of power that seemed to permeate the air itself. He'd been cleaning these offices for 3 years and had never once seen the actual executives. They were long gone by the time his shift started at 10, but he knew their names from the placards on the doors. The CFO, the COO, the various VPS, and at the very end of the hall, taking up the entire corner of the building with wraparound windows, the co-CEOs, the Reed twins. Ethan had looked them up once, curious about the men who commanded this empire. Cameron and Julian Reed, 35 years old, identical twins who'd built Reed Industries from the ground up. The photos online showed 2 devastatingly handsome black men with the kind of presence that radiated through the screen. Sharp suits, sharper eyes, the confidence of men who'd never been told no in their lives. They were featured in Forbes, Bloomberg, every major business publication. Brilliant, ruthless, untouchable. Ethan had stared at those photos longer than he should have, feeling a flutter in his stomach that he'd immediately suppressed. Men like that existed in a different universe than men like him. They were titans. He was invisible, and that was fine. That was safe. Tonight was a Tuesday, which meant Ethan started his shift at 10 p.m. as usual. He clocked in, grabbed his cleaning cart from the supply closet, and began his route. The building was quiet, just the hum of HVAC and the distant sounds of other night workers. He moved through the lower floors efficiently, emptying trash, wiping down surfaces, vacuuming the carpets. By midnight, he was ready to head up to the executive floor. The elevator ride to 42 was smooth and silent. When the doors opened, Ethan wheeled his cart into the dimly lit hallway. Emergency lighting cast everything in soft shadows, and the floor-to-ceiling windows at the end of the hall showed the glittering Manhattan skyline. It was beautiful in a cold, untouchable way, like everything else in this building. Ethan started with the smaller offices, working methodically. Empty the trash, dust the desk, straighten the chairs. He moved through the space like he'd done thousands of times before, his mind wandering as his hands worked. He thought about the book he was reading, a romance novel he'd never admit to anyone he owned. He thought about whether he should try that new Thai place near his apartment. He thought about anything except the persistent loneliness that seemed to grow heavier with each passing year. He was halfway down the hall when he noticed something different. Light was coming from under the door of the co-CEO's office. Not the emergency lighting, but actual warm light, like someone had left a lamp on. Ethan frowned. That never happened. The executive suite was always dark when he arrived. He approached cautiously, uncertain. Should he knock? Just clean around it? His supervisor had been very clear that the executive offices were to be cleaned every night without exception, but she'd never mentioned what to do if someone was actually in there. Before he could decide, the door opened, and Ethan found himself face to face with the most beautiful man he'd ever seen. He was tall, at least 6'4", with deep brown skin that seemed to glow even in the dim hallway. His head was shaved smooth, emphasizing the perfect bone structure of his face. High cheekbones, a strong jaw, full lips, and eyes so dark they were almost black. He wore a charcoal suit that had to be custom tailored, the jacket open to reveal a crisp white shirt. Even disheveled from what must have been a long day, he radiated power and confidence. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Ethan felt his mouth go dry, his heart starting to race. This had to be one of the Reed twins. Had to be. And he was even more devastating in person than in those online photos. "Oh," the man said, his voice a deep rumble that Ethan felt in his chest. "I didn't realize the cleaning crew would be here yet." He glanced at his watch, a sleek piece that probably cost more than Ethan made in 6 months. "Is it already midnight?" "Yes, sir," Ethan managed, hating how small his voice sounded. "I can come back if you're still working." No, it's fine." The man stepped back, gesturing for Ethan to enter. "We were just wrapping up anyway. Come in." "We." The word registered just as Ethan wheeled his cart into the office and saw the second man standing by the windows. He was identical to the first in every way. Same height, same build, same devastating features. The only difference was that this one wore a navy suit instead of charcoal, and when he turned to look at Ethan, there was something different in his eyes. Warmer, maybe, or more curious. "Cameron," the man by the window said, his voice identical to his brother's. "You didn't mention we had company." "I just discovered it myself, Julian," the first man, Cameron, replied. He was still watching Ethan with an expression that made Ethan want to simultaneously run away and move closer. "Our late-night cleaning crew." "I'm sorry to interrupt," Ethan said quickly, already reaching for his cart. "I can definitely come back later." "You're not interrupting anything important," Julian said, moving away from the window. As he got closer, Ethan could see the subtle differences between the twins. Julian's eyes had tiny laugh lines at the corners, and his smile came easier. Cameron seemed more reserved, more watchful, but both of them were looking at Ethan with an intensity that made his skin feel too tight. "We were just arguing about whether to pull the trigger on the Singapore expansion," Cameron said, leaning against his massive desk. "We do some of our best thinking late at night, when the rest of the world is asleep and we can actually hear ourselves think," Julian added. He'd moved close enough that Ethan could smell his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made Ethan's head swim. "I'll be quick," Ethan promised, trying to focus on his cart instead of the two men who seemed to fill the enormous office with their presence. "You won't even know I'm here." "I doubt that," Cameron said softly, and something in his tone made Ethan's eyes snap up to meet his. There was heat there, unmistakable and intense, and Ethan felt his breath catch. This was dangerous. This feeling, this awareness, the way his body was responding to their proximity. Ethan had spent 3 years building walls to keep himself safe, and 5 minutes in a room with the Reed twins was threatening to crack those walls wide open. He turned away quickly, focusing on emptying the trash bin near the door. Behind him, he could hear the twins moving around. The rustle of paper, the soft clink of glass. Were they pouring drinks at midnight? But then, men like them probably kept whatever hours they wanted. "What's your name?" Julian asked suddenly, and Ethan nearly dropped the trash bag he was holding. "Ethan," he said without thinking, then cursed himself. He should have lied, should have stayed invisible. "Ethan Walsh." "Ethan," Cameron repeated, like he was testing how the name felt in his mouth. "How long have you been cleaning our office, Ethan?" "3 years, sir." "3 years," Julian said, and he sounded almost offended. "And we've never seen you before?" "I work the night shift," Ethan explained, moving to dust the bookshelf lined with awards and expensive art pieces. "Most people are gone by the time I arrive." "But you've been here," Cameron said, "in our space, seeing our work, our lives." It wasn't a question, but Ethan answered anyway. "I don't look at anything private, sir. I just clean." "We're not worried about corporate espionage," Julian said, with a laugh that sent warmth flooding through Ethan's chest. "We're just realizing we've been sharing our space with someone for 3 years without even knowing they existed." "That's kind of the point," Ethan said, then immediately regretted it. Too honest, too familiar. "I mean, we're supposed to be invisible, not disturb you or your work." "Invisible," Cameron repeated, and there was something dark in his voice that made Ethan shiver. What a waste. Ethan didn't know how to respond to that, so he didn't. He just kept cleaning, moving around the office with practiced efficiency while trying desperately to ignore the 2 men who were definitely, absolutely watching him. He could feel their eyes tracking his movements, and it made him clumsy. He knocked over a pen holder on Julian's desk, nearly dropped his duster, stumbled slightly over a cord he'd successfully avoided for 3 years. "Are we making you nervous, Ethan?" Julian asked, and the amusement in his voice made Ethan's cheeks burn. "No, sir," Ethan lied. "You're a terrible liar," Cameron observed. He'd moved from his desk to the window, and now both twins were standing there side by side, watching Ethan with identical expressions of interest. "Your hands are shaking." Ethan looked down and realized it was true. His hands were trembling as he wiped down Cameron's desk. He shoved them into his pockets, trying to steady himself. "I'm fine." "You keep calling us sir," Julian noted. "You don't have to do that. We're not that formal." "What should I call you then?" Ethan asked, before he could stop himself. "Our names," Cameron said simply. "I'm Cameron. That's Julian. And you're Ethan." The way Cameron said his name, low and deliberate, made Ethan's stomach flip. This was so far outside his normal experience that he didn't know how to process it. Men like the Reed twins didn't talk to men like Ethan. They definitely didn't learn their names or make them nervous with heated looks that suggested things Ethan didn't dare consider. "I should finish up," Ethan said, abandoning any pretense of actually cleaning and just wanting to escape. "I have other floors to do." "Wait," Julian said, and something in his voice made Ethan freeze. "Stay for a minute, please." Ethan turned slowly to face them. They were still by the window, backlit by the Manhattan skyline, looking like something out of a fantasy. 2 powerful, gorgeous men, and they were asking him to stay. It felt surreal. "Why?" Ethan asked, the question emerging before he could think better of it. "Because we'd like to talk to you," Cameron said simply. "Because you've been part of our world for 3 years and we've never taken the time to actually see you. Because Julian's right. We do some of our best thinking late at night, and right now, we're both thinking about you." The honesty of the statement hit Ethan like a physical blow. They were thinking about him. These 2 men who could have anyone, who commanded empires and made millions with a phone call, were thinking about the invisible cleaner. "I don't understand," Ethan whispered. Julian moved first, crossing the space between them with fluid grace. He stopped close enough that Ethan had to tilt his head back to meet his eyes, close enough that Ethan could see the flecks of gold in those dark irises. "What don't you understand, Ethan?" "Why you're looking at me like that," Ethan said, his voice barely audible. "Why you're talking to me at all. You really don't see it, do you?" Cameron had moved too, and now Ethan was caught between them, Julian in front and Cameron behind. Not touching, but close enough that he could feel their heat, smell the mix of their colognes, feel the weight of their attention like a physical thing. "See what?" Ethan managed, his heart racing so fast he thought it might burst. "How beautiful you are," Julian said softly. "How you've been right here, invisible like you said, and we've been too blind to notice. Not anymore." Ethan wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. Beautiful. Him. He was average at best. Thin from never remembering to eat properly, with shaggy blonde hair that desperately needed a cut, and pale skin that never saw the sun thanks to his night schedule. He had nothing special, nothing that would catch the eye of men like this. "I think you have me confused with someone else," Ethan said, trying to step back and finding Cameron's solid warmth behind him, blocking his escape. "No confusion," Cameron said, his voice close to Ethan's ear, making him shiver. "We know exactly who you are, Ethan Walsh. The man who's been cleaning our office for 3 years. The man who keeps his head down and tries to disappear. The man who's been hurt before and thinks staying invisible will keep him safe." "How do you—" Ethan started, then stopped. How could Cameron possibly know that? "Your eyes," Julian explained gently. "They give you away. You look like someone who's been taught not to hope for anything good." The accuracy of the observation made Ethan's throat tight. He wanted to deny it, but he couldn't, because they were right. He had learned not to hope, not to want, not to reach for anything that might hurt him. "We want to change that," Cameron said quietly, "if you'll let us." "Change what?" Ethan asked, though part of him already knew the answer and was terrified of it. "The way you see yourself," Julian said, reaching up slowly, giving Ethan time to pull away. When Ethan didn't move, couldn't move, Julian's fingers brushed his cheek with devastating gentleness. "The way you hide from the world. The belief that you're not worth seeing." Ethan's eyes burned with unexpected tears. No one had touched him with such tenderness in years. No one had looked at him the way the Reed twins were looking at him now, like he mattered, like he was worth their time and attention. "I don't know what you want from me," Ethan whispered. "Everything," Cameron said simply, "but we'll start with dinner." "Dinner," Ethan repeated, unable to process the suggestion. "Yes, dinner," Julian said with a smile. "That thing people do where they sit together and eat food and talk and get to know each other. We'd like to do that with you, tomorrow night if you're free." "I work tomorrow night," Ethan said automatically. "Then we'll have a late dinner," Cameron countered. "After your shift, we'll pick you up." "Both of you?" Ethan asked, his mind reeling. "Both of us," Julian confirmed. "Is that a problem?" "It should be. Everything about this should be a problem. The power imbalance, the way they were technically his employers, the fact that there were 2 of them and 1 of him, and he had no idea what they actually wanted beyond dinner. But when Ethan looked between them, saw the genuine interest in their eyes, felt the careful way they were giving him space despite surrounding them, he couldn't find it in himself to say no. "Okay," he heard himself say. "Okay, I'll have dinner with you." The smiles they gave him were identical and devastating, lighting up their faces in a way that made Ethan's breath catch. He was in so much trouble. He knew it with a certainty that should have sent him running. But instead, he stood there between them, feeling more alive than he had in 3 years, and let himself want something for the first time since Marcus destroyed him. "Give us your number," Julian said, pulling out his phone. "We'll text you tomorrow with the details." Ethan recited his number with shaking hands, watched Julian input it, saw the message that immediately lit up his phone. Just the words, "It's Julian and Cameron. Looking forward to tomorrow night." "I should go," Ethan said, though he didn't move. "Finish my shift." "Of course," Cameron said, but he didn't step back either. None of them moved for a long moment, caught in the strange tension that had built in the room. Finally, Julian took a deliberate step back, giving Ethan space to breathe. "We'll let you work. But Ethan, we meant what we said. We see you now, and we're not going to stop seeing you." Ethan nodded, not trusting his voice. and somehow managed to grab his cart and stumble out of the office. In the hallway, he leaned against the wall and tried to catch his breath. His whole body was trembling, his heart racing, his mind spinning with what had just happened. The Reed twins wanted to have dinner with him, both of them. They'd called him beautiful. They'd touched him with such gentleness. They'd seen through every wall he'd built and called him out on his fear. And God help him, Ethan wanted to see them again, wanted to know what dinner with them would be like, wanted to feel the way he'd felt in their office, caught between them, the center of their attention, like he mattered. It was dangerous. It was probably a mistake. But as Ethan finished his shift and rode the subway home as the sun was rising, he couldn't stop thinking about tomorrow night. Couldn't stop checking his phone to make sure their message was real and not something he'd imagined. He fell asleep that morning with his phone clutched in his hand, their words running through his mind on repeat. "We see you now, and we're not going to stop seeing you." For the first time in 3 years, Ethan let himself hope that maybe, just maybe, being seen wouldn't destroy him after all. The next evening, Ethan woke up at his usual 7 p.m. with a knot of anxiety in his stomach. He had 12 hours before his shift ended, 12 hours before the Reed twins picked him up for dinner, and he had no idea what to do with the nervous energy that had him pacing his small studio apartment. He'd spent his sleeping hours dreaming about them, vivid dreams that left him flushed and aching when he woke. Dreams of strong hands and deep voices and the way they'd surrounded him in their office, like he was something precious. He'd woken up hard and wanting, and had to take care of himself in the shower while images of Cameron and Julian played behind his closed eyes. The guilt came afterward, as it always did. These were his bosses. Technically, they owned the company that contracted the cleaning service that employed him. This was inappropriate on every level. And yet he couldn't stop thinking about the way they'd looked at him, the promise in their voices, the heat in their eyes. His phone buzzed around 8 p.m., and Ethan nearly dropped it in his haste to check the message. It was from Julian. "Good evening, Ethan. Hope you slept well. Cameron and I are looking forward to tonight. We were thinking Italian for dinner. There's a great place in Tribeca we love. Does that work for you? We'll pick you up at your building at 2:30 a.m. when your shift ends. Let us know your address." Ethan stared at the message, warmth flooding through him. They were really doing this. It was really happening. He typed back quickly before he could overthink it. "Italian sounds perfect. Thank you." Then he added his address, hesitated, and sent it before he could talk himself out of it. The response was almost immediate. "Perfect. Wear something comfortable. This is about getting to know each other, not impressing anyone. See you tonight. Comfortable." That was good, because Ethan's entire wardrobe consisted of comfortable, his cleaning uniform and a handful of jeans and t-shirts he'd owned since college, nothing remotely nice enough for dinner with billionaires. He spent the next few hours cleaning his already clean apartment, trying on different combinations of his limited clothes, and generally working himself into a state of near panic. By the time he had to leave for his shift, he'd changed outfits 4 times and settled on dark jeans and a soft gray sweater that had been a Christmas gift from his mother years ago. It was the nicest thing he owned that could still be considered comfortable. The shift dragged interminably. Ethan moved through his usual routine, but his mind was elsewhere. He kept checking his phone, kept thinking about what he'd say, how he'd act, whether this whole thing was a massive mistake. His co-workers noticed his distraction, and Maria, who'd been cleaning the building longer than anyone, cornered him in the break room around midnight. "You okay, mijo?" she asked in her heavy accent, maternal concern in her dark eyes. "You seem nervous tonight." "I'm fine," Ethan lied, pouring himself coffee he didn't need. "Just tired." Maria gave him a look that said she didn't believe him for a second, but she let it go. "You be careful," she said instead. "Whatever you're nervous about, you be careful." "I will," Ethan promised, touched by her concern. By the time he reached the executive floor at midnight, his nerves were at a fever pitch. He half expected Cameron and Julian to be there again, waiting for him, but the floor was dark and empty. Of course it was. They were billionaires. They had better things to do than hang around their office waiting for the cleaning guy, except they were going to pick him up in 2.5 hours. They were taking him to dinner. This was really happening. Ethan cleaned their office in a daze, unable to stop thinking about the night before, about how they'd surrounded him, the way Julian had touched his face, Cameron's voice in his ear. He finished the executive floor and moved through the rest of his route mechanically, his mind already at dinner, already imagining conversations and possibilities he had no business imagining. His shift ended at 2 a.m. Ethan clocked out, changed out of his uniform into the clothes he'd carefully selected, and tried to calm his racing heart. He had 30 minutes before they arrived. He spent it pacing the employee locker room, checking his reflection in the small mirror, and trying to talk himself down from the edge of panic. "You can do this," he told himself firmly. "It's just dinner, just conversation. They're just men." Except they weren't just men. They were Cameron and Julian Reed, titans of industry, and they wanted to have dinner with him, and he had no idea why. His phone buzzed at exactly 2:25 a.m. "We're outside. Black car, driver's side. Take your time." Ethan took a deep breath, grabbed his jacket, and headed for the exit. The night security guard, Marcus, different Marcus, Ethan reminded himself. Not that Marcus nodded at him as he passed. "Have a good night, Ethan." "You too," Ethan managed, pushing through the doors into the cool November air. The car was right there, sleek and black and probably worth more than Ethan would make in his entire life. As he approached, the back door opened and Julian stepped out. He was dressed casually in dark jeans and a black sweater, but he still managed to look like he'd stepped off a magazine cover. His smile when he saw Ethan was warm and genuine. "Right on time," Julian said, reaching out to take Ethan's hand and pull him gently toward the car. "Cameron's already complaining that I'm making us late." "You're the one who insisted on getting out to greet him properly." Cameron's voice came from inside the car, amused and affectionate. Julian helped Ethan into the back seat, then slid in beside him. Cameron was on Ethan's other side, dressed similarly in jeans and a dark blue sweater. Sandwiched between them in the close confines of the car, Ethan was overwhelmed by their presence, their scent, the heat of their bodies on either side of him. "Hi," Ethan managed, his voice barely a whisper. "Hi yourself," Cameron said, and the warmth in his voice made Ethan's chest tight. "You look good. I like the sweater." "It's comfortable," Ethan said, then winced at how lame that sounded. "Exactly what we asked for," Julian said easily, squeezing Ethan's hand briefly before letting go. "We want you comfortable, Ethan. This isn't an interrogation or a job interview. It's just dinner with two guys who want to get to know you better." The car pulled away from the curb, driven by someone Ethan couldn't see through the privacy screen. He tried to focus on his breathing, on staying calm, but it was difficult with Cameron and Julian so close. Both of them turned slightly toward him, their attention focused entirely on him. "Are you nervous?" Cameron asked gently. "Terrified," Ethan admitted before he could stop himself. "Of us?" Julian asked, and he sounded genuinely concerned. "Of this," Ethan clarified. "Of not knowing what this is or what you want or why you're doing this." Cameron and Julian exchanged a look over Ethan's head, some silent communication passing between them. Then Cameron spoke, his voice serious. "What we want is to spend time with you, get to know you, see if this connection we felt last night is real or just a fluke. As for why, you intrigued us, Ethan. You've been invisible for 3 years, and then suddenly you weren't, and we couldn't stop thinking about you." "Both of you?" Ethan asked, the question he'd been afraid to voice. "Both of us," Julian confirmed. "Cameron and I have always shared everything. Our business, our lives, our interests. It's just how we work." The implication hung in the air between them. They shared everything, including romantic interests, including men. Ethan's mind reeled at the possibility, at what that might mean. "I've never," Ethan started, then stopped, not sure how to finish. "Never what?" Cameron prompted gently. "Never been with two people," Ethan said, his cheeks burning. "Never even thought about it." "We're not asking you to be with anyone tonight," Julian said quickly. "We're asking you to have dinner, talk, see if we even like each other beyond the physical attraction. The rest is something we can figure out together if we get that far." If. The word gave Ethan an out, a way to breathe. This wasn't a foregone conclusion. They weren't assuming anything. They were just seeing where this led. "Okay," Ethan said quietly. "I can do that." The restaurant was small and intimate, tucked into a basement space in Tribeca. When they arrived, they were greeted warmly by the owner, who clearly knew Cameron and Julian well. He led them to a private table in the back, away from the handful of other late-night diners. "Nico, this is Ethan," Julian introduced him. "Ethan, Nico owns this place and makes the best pasta in the city." "Any friend of the Reeds is a friend of mine," Nico said with a warm smile, shaking Ethan's hand. "I'll bring you the special tasting menu, yes? Trust me." "That would be perfect," Cameron agreed, and Nico disappeared into the kitchen. Ethan found himself seated at a small round table with Cameron on his left and Julian on his right. They were close enough that their knees occasionally brushed under the table, sending sparks of awareness through Ethan's body. He tried to focus on the menu, the wine list, anything but the two devastatingly handsome men watching him with open interest. "So," Julian said once they were alone, "tell us about yourself, Ethan Walsh. Beyond the cleaning, who are you?" It was such a simple question, but Ethan found he didn't know how to answer it. Who was he? The invisible man who cleaned offices? The damaged boy who'd been destroyed by his college boyfriend? The lonely person who'd built walls so high he'd forgotten what connection felt like? "I don't know if there's much to tell," Ethan said finally. "I'm pretty boring." "I doubt that," Cameron said firmly. "Where are you from?" "Ohio originally," Ethan said. "Small town. I came to New York for college and stayed." "What did you study?" Julian asked. "English literature," Ethan admitted. "I wanted to be a writer." "Wanted?" Cameron picked up on the past tense. "You don't want to anymore?" Ethan shrugged, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Life happened. Bills needed to be paid. Writing doesn't exactly pay well, especially when you're starting out. "So you clean offices instead," Julian said, not judgmentally, just observing. "It's honest work," Ethan said defensively. "It pays the bills, lets me live in the city." "We're not criticizing," Cameron said quickly, placing his hand over Ethan's on the table. The contact sent electricity up Ethan's arm. "We're just trying to understand you. Why someone with an English degree is cleaning our office at 2 a.m. instead of pursuing their dreams." "Because dreams don't pay rent," Ethan said, more harshly than he intended. He started to pull his hand away, but Cameron held it gently. "Fair point," Cameron acknowledged. "But you still write, don't you? For yourself?" Ethan stared at him, wondering how he could possibly know that. "Sometimes," he admitted. "Late at night when I can't sleep." "What do you write about?" Julian asked, genuinely curious. "Things that don't exist," Ethan said quietly. "Places I've never been, people I'll never meet, love that lasts." The last part slipped out before he could stop it, and he felt his cheeks burn. But neither twin looked judgmental. If anything, they looked sad. "You don't think love can last?" Julian asked softly. "I think it lasts for some people," Ethan said carefully. "Just not for me." "Why not for you?" Cameron pressed gently. Ethan looked between them. These two perfect men who seemed genuinely interested in his answer. He could lie, deflect, keep his walls up. Or he could be honest and risk them seeing all the broken pieces he usually kept hidden. "Because I'm not the kind of person people keep," Ethan said finally, Marcus's words from years ago echoing in his mind. "I'm the kind they use until something better comes along." The silence that followed was heavy. When Ethan dared to look up, he found both twins watching him with identical expressions of something that looked like anger. "Who told you that?" Julian asked, his voice tight. "It doesn't matter," Ethan said quickly. "It was a long time ago." "It matters if you still believe it," Cameron said firmly. He shifted his chair closer, his hand still holding Ethan's. "Because it's complete bullshit, Ethan. You're not disposable. You're not temporary. And whoever made you think you were was a fool who didn't deserve you." Ethan felt his eyes burn with unexpected tears. He blinked them back furiously, not wanting to cry in front of them, not wanting to be that vulnerable. But it was hard when Cameron was looking at him with such fierce protectiveness, when Julian had moved his chair closer too, surrounding him with their warmth and attention. "I don't know you well enough yet to argue with you," Ethan said, his voice shaking slightly, "but I appreciate you saying that." "We'll make you believe it," Julian said, with quiet determination, "however long it takes." The food arrived then, course after course of incredible pasta and rich sauces and fresh bread. Nico brought wine, and Cameron and Julian made sure Ethan's glass was always full, but never pushed him to drink more than he was comfortable with. The conversation shifted to lighter topics: favorite books, movies they'd seen, places they'd traveled. Ethan learned that Cameron was the more serious twin, the one who worried about details and made sure everything ran smoothly. Julian was the charmer, the one who smoothed over conflicts and found creative solutions. Together, they balanced each other perfectly, finishing each other's sentences, sharing looks that communicated entire conversations. Watching them together, Ethan felt something unfamiliar bloom in his chest. Want? Yes. Desire? Absolutely. But also something softer, a longing to be part of that connection, to be seen by them the way they saw each other. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said after his third glass of wine had loosened his tongue. "Why me? You could have anyone. Why pay attention to the night cleaner?" Cameron and Julian exchanged another one of those loaded looks. Then Cameron spoke. "Do you want the honest answer?" "Always," Ethan said. "Because you made us feel something we haven't felt in a long time," Cameron said simply. "Julian and I have been together, in every sense, for our entire adult lives. We've dated other people, sometimes together, sometimes separately. But it's been years since either of us felt that instant connection with someone, that pull. And then you walked into our office, trying so hard to be invisible, and we both felt it. Both of us, at the same time." "What did you feel?" Ethan asked, his heart racing. "Want," Julian said bluntly. "Immediate, intense want, but also curiosity, protectiveness, the desire to know everything about you, to make you smile, to see what you'd look like if you stopped hiding." "I'm not hiding," Ethan protested weakly. "Yes, you are," Cameron said gently. "You've built walls around yourself so high you've forgotten what it feels like to be seen. We want to help you tear those walls down." "What if I don't want to?" Ethan asked, even though it was a lie. He did want to. He was terrified, but he wanted it. "Then we'll respect that," Julian said immediately. "This only works if you want it too, Ethan. We're not going to push you into anything, but we're hoping you'll give us a chance. Give yourself a chance." Ethan looked between them, these two incredible men who were looking at him like he was something precious, something worth their time and attention. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. "I don't know how to do this," Ethan admitted. "I don't know how to be what you want." "You don't have to be anything except yourself," Cameron said firmly. "That's all we're asking for." The rest of the dinner passed in a warm haze. The food was incredible. The wine made Ethan pleasantly fuzzy, and the conversation flowed more easily than he'd ever experienced. By the time Nico brought out the dessert, an incredible tiramisu that the three of them shared, Ethan felt like he'd known Cameron and Julian for years instead of hours. When they finally left the restaurant, the sky was starting to lighten with the first hints of dawn. Ethan had been up for nearly 24 hours, and exhaustion was hitting him hard. In the car, he found himself nodding off between the twins, his head dropping toward Cameron's shoulder before he jerked himself awake. "Sleep," Cameron said softly, pulling Ethan against him. "We'll wake you when we get to your place." "I shouldn't," Ethan mumbled, but he was already drifting off, lulled by Cameron's warmth and the gentle motion of the car. He woke briefly when they arrived at his building in Queens, disoriented and confused. Julian helped him out of the car, steadying him when he stumbled. "Easy," Julian said with a soft laugh. "We may have let you have too much wine." "I'm fine," Ethan protested, even as he swayed slightly. "Come on," Cameron said, appearing on his other side. "We'll walk you up." "You don't have to," Ethan said, but he was secretly grateful when they each took one of his arms and guided him into the building. His studio apartment was on the 3rd floor, no elevator. Cameron and Julian practically carried him up the stairs, and Ethan was too tired and wine-fuzzy to be embarrassed. When they reached his door, he fumbled with his keys until Julian gently took them and unlocked it for him. The apartment was tiny, barely bigger than a hotel room, with a single window that faced a brick wall. Ethan's futon was unmade, his small kitchen area was cluttered with dishes, and his clothes were in piles around the single closet. He felt a flush of embarrassment, seeing his humble space through their eyes. But neither twin said anything about the size or the mess. Cameron guided Ethan to the futon while Julian closed the door behind them and locked it. "You should get some sleep," Cameron said gently, helping Ethan sit down. "Will I see you again?" Ethan asked, the wine making him more honest than he should be. "Or was this a one-time thing?" "You'll see us again," Julian promised, kneeling in front of Ethan to help him with his shoes. "If you want to." "I want to," Ethan admitted, too tired to hide it. "I really want to." The smiles they gave him were identical and devastating. Cameron brushed Ethan's hair back from his face with such tenderness that Ethan's breath caught. "Then you will," Cameron said simply. "Sleep now. We'll text you later." They left quietly, and Ethan barely had the energy to change into sleep clothes before collapsing onto his futon. He was asleep within seconds, his mind full of dark eyes and deep voices, and the promise of seeing them again. Ethan woke late the next afternoon to his phone buzzing insistently. He grabbed it with sleep-heavy hands, his head pounding from the wine and lack of proper rest. The screen showed 3 missed calls and a series of texts, all from a number he didn't recognize until he remembered. The twins. The first message was from Julian, sent around noon. "Hope you're sleeping well. Cameron's already asking when we can see you again. He's impatient." The second was from Cameron an hour later. "Ignore Julian. I'm not impatient. I'm just hoping last night was as good for you as it was for us. Text when you wake up." The third was from Julian again. "We're both impatient. Call us when you can." Ethan stared at the messages, his heart doing something complicated in his chest. They wanted to see him again. They'd said as much last night, but seeing it in writing, seeing their eagerness, made it feel real in a way that terrified and thrilled him. He typed back before he could overthink it. "Just woke up. Last night was amazing. Thank you." The response came within seconds from Cameron. "Finally. We were starting to worry we'd broken you. Are you free tonight?" Tonight. They wanted to see him tonight. Ethan glanced at his clock. It was almost 3 in the afternoon, which meant he had about 4 hours before his shift started. His fingers hesitated over the keyboard. "I have work at 10, he typed. Julian's response, "Then we'll pick you up at 6. Casual dinner, nothing fancy. We just want to see you." Cameron added, "Say yes, Ethan. We miss you already." The simple honesty of it made Ethan's throat tight. "Yes," he typed. "Where should I meet you?" "We'll pick you up at your place. Wear whatever you're comfortable in. See you at 6. Ethan spent the next 3 hours in a state of controlled panic. He cleaned his apartment until it was as presentable as a studio in Queens could be, showered and agonized over what to wear, and tried not to think too hard about what was happening. He was going on a second date with the Reed twins. 2 of the most powerful men in the city wanted to spend time with him. It felt surreal. By the time 6 o'clock arrived, Ethan was wearing his nicest jeans and a dark green Henley that brought out his eyes, or so his mother had told him years ago. He'd even attempted to style his perpetually messy blonde hair, though it refused to cooperate. When the knock came at his door, his heart leapt into his throat. He opened it to find both twins standing in the narrow hallway, looking impossibly good in casual clothes. Julian wore dark jeans and a leather jacket over a white t-shirt. Cameron had on black jeans and a charcoal sweater that made his dark skin glow. They both smiled when they saw him, identical expressions of warmth and desire that made Ethan's knees weak. "Hi," Julian said, stepping forward to press a gentle kiss to Ethan's cheek. "You look good." "So do you," Ethan managed, then blushed when Cameron laughed softly. "We clean up okay," Cameron agreed, also leaning in to kiss Ethan's other cheek. The casual affection made Ethan's skin tingle. "Ready to go?" They took him to a small Thai place in the village, the kind of hole-in-the-wall restaurant that only locals knew about. The food was incredible, and the conversation flowed even more easily than the night before. Ethan found himself relaxing, laughing at Julian's stories about their early days building the company, listening with rapt attention as Cameron explained the technology behind their latest product. But underneath the casual dinner conversation, Ethan could feel the tension building. The way Cameron's hand would rest on his knee under the table. The way Julian's fingers would brush his when reaching for the shared dishes. The heat in their eyes when they looked at him. They wanted him. Both of them. And God help him, Ethan wanted them back. After dinner, they walked through Washington Square Park, Ethan in the middle with a twin on either side. Julian's hand found his, threading their fingers together with easy confidence. On his other side, Cameron's arm went around his waist, pulling him close. "Is this okay?" Cameron asked quietly. "We're moving fast. If it's too much..." "It's not too much," Ethan interrupted, surprised by his own certainty. "It's actually perfect." They ended up at the twins' penthouse in Tribeca, a sprawling space that took up the entire top floor of a renovated warehouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city, and the interior was all exposed brick and modern furniture, somehow both industrial and luxurious. "This is incredible," Ethan breathed, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. "It's home," Julian said with a shrug, but he looked pleased by Ethan's reaction. "Can I get you something to drink? Wine? Coffee?" "Water's fine," Ethan said, still overwhelmed by the space, by being here with them, by everything. Cameron guided him to the massive sectional sofa that faced the windows. "Sit with me," he said softly. "Talk to me." Ethan sat, and Cameron immediately pulled him close, tucking Ethan against his side. Julian returned with water for all of them and settled on Ethan's other side, creating that same delicious sense of being surrounded that Ethan had felt in their office. "I need to tell you something," Cameron said, his voice serious enough that Ethan felt a flutter of nerves. "Before this goes any further, you need to understand how Julian and I work." "Okay," Ethan said carefully. Julian took over. "Cameron and I have been together, romantically and sexually, since we were 20. We tried dating other people separately for a while, but it never worked. We're too connected, too in sync. We need each other. When we meet someone we're both interested in," Cameron continued, "we pursue them together. It's not about being greedy or collecting people. It's about finding someone who completes us, who fits with both of us. We think you might be that person," Julian said softly, "but we need you to understand what you'd be getting into. It's not a conventional relationship. It's the three of us, equal partners, both of us loving you, you loving both of us." Ethan's mind was spinning. "I've never even thought about something like that," he admitted. "I don't know if I can..." "You don't have to decide anything tonight," Cameron assured him. "We're just being honest about what we want, what we're hoping for. If you need time to think about it, take all the time you need. But you should also know," Julian added, his hand finding Ethan's, "that we're already halfway in love with you. So if you're going to run, do it now, before we fall completely." Ethan looked between them, these two incredible men who were offering him something he'd never dared to dream about. Love, partnership, being seen and wanted and cherished. It was terrifying. It was impossible. It was everything he'd ever wanted. "I'm not running," Ethan heard himself say. "I'm terrified, and I don't know how to do this, but I'm not running." The relief on their faces was palpable. Cameron pulled Ethan into a kiss that was gentle and searching, asking questions with his lips that Ethan answered with small sounds of pleasure. When they finally broke apart, Julian was there, turning Ethan's face to kiss him with the same tender intensity. "Come to bed with us," Julian murmured against Ethan's lips. "Not for sex, not yet, just to be close. Let us hold you." Ethan nodded, unable to form words. They led him through the penthouse to a massive bedroom dominated by a huge bed. Cameron disappeared into what must have been a closet and returned with soft sleep clothes, a t-shirt and pajama pants that would be too big on Ethan, but comfortable. "You can change in the bathroom," Cameron said, pressing the clothes into Ethan's hands. "Take your time." In the bathroom, which was bigger than Ethan's entire apartment, he changed with shaking hands. This was really happening. He was spending the night with Cameron and Julian Reed. When he emerged, both twins were already in bed, having changed into similar sleep clothes. The sight of them there, waiting for him, made Ethan's heart race. "Come here," Julian said, patting the space between them. Ethan climbed into bed, and immediately they were surrounding him with warmth. Cameron behind him, Julian in front, both of them touching him with gentle hands. Cameron's arm went around Ethan's waist, pulling him back against his solid chest. Julian's hand cupped Ethan's face, thumb stroking his cheekbone. "Is this okay?" Cameron murmured against Ethan's neck. "It's perfect," Ethan breathed, and meant it. He'd never felt safer, more wanted, more cherished than he did in this moment, held between them. They talked quietly, sharing stories and secrets. Ethan told them about growing up in Ohio, about his dreams of being a writer, about Marcus, and the devastation of that betrayal. The twins listened without judgment, Cameron's arms tightening protectively when Ethan's voice shook. In return, they told him about building their company from nothing, about the racism they'd faced in the tech world, about the pressure of being young black CEOs in a predominantly white industry, about the loneliness of success, of never knowing if people wanted them or what they represented. "We've been looking for someone real for so long," Julian said softly. "Someone who sees us, not our money or status. Someone who makes us feel like we can just be Cameron and Julian, not the Reed twins." "You make me feel like I can be just Ethan," Ethan admitted. "Not the invisible cleaner or the damaged guy who can't maintain a relationship. Just me." "You're so much more than just Ethan," Cameron said against his hair. "You're extraordinary, and we're going to spend however long it takes proving that to you." Ethan fell asleep like that, wrapped in their arms, feeling more at peace than he had in years. When he woke hours later, he was alone in the massive bed. Panic flared until he heard voices from the other room and smelled coffee. He found them in the kitchen, both shirtless and perfect, making breakfast. The sight made Ethan's mouth go dry. Two beautiful men, comfortable in their skin, moving around each other with practiced ease. "Morning, sleepyhead," Julian said with a smile, crossing to pull Ethan into a kiss. "Coffee?" "Please," Ethan managed, still overwhelmed by the casual intimacy of it all. They fed him breakfast and sent him home with barely enough time to change for his shift. But before he left, Cameron pulled him aside. "I know your shift ends at 2 a.m., Cameron said. "Will you come back here after? Spend the rest of the night with us." "Every night this week," Julian added, appearing at Cameron's side. "We want as much time with you as possible." Ethan should have said no. Should have kept some boundaries, some space, but he found himself nodding, already counting the hours until he could see them again. The pattern continued for 2 weeks. Ethan would work his shift, then go to the penthouse where Cameron and Julian would be waiting. They'd talk until dawn, learning each other's bodies through careful touches and deep kisses, but never going further than that. The twins seemed determined to build something real before taking things to the physical conclusion they all wanted. It was simultaneously the most frustrating and most fulfilling 2 weeks of Ethan's life. He was falling for them, helplessly and completely. The way Cameron would read aloud to him from Ethan's favorite books, his deep voice turning familiar words into something new. The way Julian would cook for them, dancing around the kitchen and pulling Ethan into impromptu waltzes. The way both of them looked at him like he hung the moon. But Ethan could also feel the tension building, the way their kisses grew more heated, their touches more desperate. They wanted more. He wanted more. The careful control was starting to fray at the edges. It finally broke on a Friday night. Ethan had finished his shift and arrived at the penthouse to find the twins waiting for him with an intensity that made his breath catch. "We need to talk," Cameron said, his voice serious. Ethan's stomach dropped. This was it. They'd realized he wasn't worth the effort. "Okay," he managed. Julian took his hand, pulling him to the sofa. "We can't keep doing this," he said, and Ethan's heart shattered. "We can't keep stopping. It's killing us, being this close to you and not showing you how much we want you." "Oh," Ethan breathed, relief and desire flooding through him in equal measure. I thought you were ending things." "Never," Cameron said fiercely. "But Ethan, we need to know. Are you ready for this? For all of this? Because once we start, we're not going to want to stop." Ethan looked between them, these two men who'd somehow become everything to him in 2 short weeks. I'm terrified, he admitted. I've never done this before. Never been with two people. Never. He broke off, cheeks burning. Never what? Julian prompted gently. Never felt safe enough to want it this much, Ethan finished quietly. Cameron's expression softened. We'll take care of you, he promised. We'll go slow. Make sure you're ready for everything. This is about your pleasure, Ethan. About making you feel good. About worshiping you the way you deserve, Julian added, his hand cupping Ethan's face. Will you let us? Ethan nodded, unable to form words past the emotion clogging his throat. What happened next was a revelation. They took him to the bedroom, laying him on the massive bed with reverent care. Cameron kissed him deeply, while Julian's hands explored his body through his clothes, learning every curve and plane. Can we undress you? Cameron asked against Ethan's mouth. Yes, Ethan breathed. Please. They removed his clothes slowly, pausing to admire and touch newly exposed skin. When Ethan lay naked before them, trembling with want and nerves, they both just looked at him with such hunger that it made him feel beautiful for the first time in his life. Perfect, Julian murmured, his hands skating over Ethan's pale skin. You're absolutely perfect. Then they were touching him everywhere, learning what made him gasp, what made him moan, what made his back arch off the bed. Cameron's mouth found sensitive spots, while Julian's hands worked magic, building Ethan's pleasure higher and higher until he was begging. Please, Ethan gasped, not even sure what he was asking for, just knowing he needed more. We've got you, Cameron assured him, his voice rough with desire. Just let go, baby. Let us make you feel good. When the pleasure finally crested, Ethan cried out, his body shaking with the intensity of it. They held him through it, murmuring praise and encouragement, making him feel cherished even in his most vulnerable moment. Afterward, as he lay boneless and satisfied between them, Ethan felt tears sliding down his temples. Not sad tears, but overwhelmed ones. He'd never experienced anything like that. Never been touched with such care and attention. Never felt so completely wanted. Hey, Julian said softly, wiping the tears away with his thumb. You okay? I'm perfect, Ethan whispered. I just never knew it could be like that. That was just the beginning, Cameron promised, pressing a kiss to Ethan's shoulder. We're going to spend the rest of our lives showing you how good it can be. The rest of our lives. The casual way Cameron said it, like it was a foregone conclusion, made something warm bloom in Ethan's chest. They wanted forever, with him. Over the next few weeks, their relationship deepened in every way. Physically, they explored each other with growing confidence and passion. Emotionally, they opened up in ways that left them all vulnerable and connected. Ethan found himself spending less time at his tiny apartment and more time at the penthouse, his things gradually migrating until Julian laughingly suggested he should just move in. I'm serious, Julian said when Ethan tried to laugh it off. Your lease is up next month anyway. Move in with us. Make this official. Official, Ethan repeated, his heart racing. What does that mean? It means we want you here, Cameron said, pulling Ethan onto his lap on the sofa. Permanently. It means we love you, and we want to build a life with you. Both of you? Ethan asked unnecessarily. Both of us, Julian confirmed, settling beside them. Completely, irrevocably in love with you. All three of us together. I love you too, Ethan whispered, the words feeling both terrifying and perfect. Both of you. So much it scares me. Then be scared with us, Cameron said gently. Move in. Let us love you every day. Let yourself be happy. Ethan moved in the next week, his meager possessions barely filling one closet in the massive penthouse. But the twins made space for him in other ways, clearing a desk for his writing, stocking his favorite foods, making sure he felt at home in their space. 3 months into their relationship, Ethan finally quit his cleaning job. The twins had been gently pushing him to pursue his writing full-time, offering to support him financially until he got established. It took weeks of convincing before Ethan accepted, his pride warring with his desire to finally chase his dreams. You're not taking advantage of us, Julian said firmly when Ethan voiced his concerns for the 100th time. We want to support your dreams. That's what people who love each other do. 6 months in, they made it official in another way. Cameron and Julian took Ethan to a small jewelry store in Soho, where they had 3 matching rings made, simple platinum bands, identical except for the dates engraved inside, the night they met. "It's not legally binding," Cameron explained, as they slipped the rings onto each other's fingers. "The law doesn't recognize relationships like ours, but we know what this means. We're committed to each other, all 3 of us, for as long as we all shall live." Ethan stared at the ring on his finger, overwhelmed by the symbolism of it. He was theirs, they were his, forever. But their happiness didn't exist in a vacuum. There were challenges, complications that came with their unconventional relationship. The public attention when the media caught wind of the Reed twins' unusual domestic situation, the whispers at business events, the occasional hateful messages from people who didn't understand or approve. The worst came when one of Reed Industries' major investors threatened to pull his funding if the twins didn't end their inappropriate relationship. Ethan overheard the phone call, heard Cameron's cold, controlled fury as he told the investor exactly where he could shove his money. After Cameron hung up, Ethan found him standing at the windows, tension radiating from every line of his body. "I'm causing problems for your company," Ethan said quietly. "Maybe I should—" "Don't," Cameron interrupted, turning to face him with blazing eyes. "Don't you dare suggest leaving us. We will burn Reed Industries to the ground before we give you up. Do you understand me?" Julian appeared, having heard the conversation. "We've already lined up replacement investors," he said calmly. "Ones who don't care who we love. You're not causing problems, Ethan. You're the best thing that ever happened to us, and anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve to be part of our lives." Ethan felt his eyes burn with tears. "I love you both so much." "We love you too," Cameron said, pulling him into a fierce embrace. "Nothing is going to change that. Nothing." 1 year after that first meeting in their office, the twins threw a party to celebrate their anniversary. They invited friends, family, business associates, everyone who mattered in their lives. It was equal parts celebration and declaration. This is our family, and we're not hiding it. Ethan stood with Cameron and Julian on the penthouse balcony, looking out at the glittering city below, while music and laughter spilled from inside. "Remember when you were invisible?" Julian asked with a smile. "When you cleaned our office and we didn't even know you existed?" "I remember," Ethan said softly. "I remember being so lonely I'd forgotten what connection felt like." "And now," Cameron prompted. "Now I have everything," Ethan said simply. "You two, this life, the freedom to write, the courage to be myself. You changed everything." "We changed each other," Julian corrected. "You made us better, Ethan. Made us remember that there's more to life than business and success. You taught us how to actually live." They stood there together, 3 men bound by love that defied convention, watching the sun set over Manhattan. Behind them, their friends and family celebrated. Ahead of them, a future stretched full of possibility and promise. 2 years in, Ethan's first novel was published. A love story, naturally, about 3 people finding each other against all odds. It was dedicated to C and J, who taught me that love doesn't follow rules. The book became a surprise bestseller, and Ethan found himself doing interviews and events, finally living the dream he'd abandoned. At every event, Cameron and Julian were there, supporting him. They'd sit in the audience at readings, beaming with pride. They'd celebrate every milestone, every good review, every achievement. They made sure Ethan knew his success was his own, earned through his talent and hard work, but that they'd always be there to cheer him on. 5 years after that first night in their office, they'd built something extraordinary together. A home, a life, a love that had only deepened with time. Ethan wrote during the day. The twins ran their company, and at night they came together to share their lives. There were still challenges, still moments when Ethan's old insecurities would surface, still times when the outside world reminded them they were different, but they faced everything together. 3 people who'd found in each other something rare and precious. One evening, Ethan was in the twins' office at Reed Industries, having stopped by after a book signing. It was late, well past when most employees had left, and he found Cameron and Julian exactly where he'd first seen them, standing by the windows, looking out at the city. "Remember this view?" Cameron asked as Ethan joined them. "The first time you saw us here?" "I remember," Ethan said, standing between them just as he had that night. "I remember being terrified and overwhelmed and trying so hard to be invisible." "You failed spectacularly at being invisible," Julian said with a laugh. "From the moment we saw you, we couldn't look away." Cameron turned to Ethan, his expression serious. "We never properly thanked you." "For what?" Ethan asked, confused. "For being brave," Cameron said simply. "For staying that first night when you could have run. For coming to dinner. For giving us a chance. For choosing us even when it was scary and unconventional and complicated. For loving us," Julian added, his hand finding Ethan's. "For letting us love you back." Ethan felt his eyes prick with tears. "You don't need to thank me for that. Loving you too is the easiest thing I've ever done." "Still," Cameron said, pulling Ethan close, "thank you for everything." They stood there together, three men who'd found each other in the most unlikely way, bound by a love that defied every rule and exceeded every expectation. Outside the windows, Manhattan glittered with possibility. Inside the office, they held each other close and knew they were exactly where they belonged. Years later, when Ethan would write about this moment in his third novel, he'd struggled to capture the perfection of it. The way the city lights reflected in the windows, the strength of Cameron's arms around him, the warmth of Julian's hand in his, the absolute certainty that this was his family, his home, his forever. He'd write about how love could bloom in the most unexpected places, between the most unlikely people, about how being seen, truly seen, could change everything, about how three people could create something more beautiful than convention allowed for. But mostly, he'd write about how a lonely cleaner who thought he was invisible found two men who made him feel seen, who made him feel cherished, who made him believe, for the first time in his life, that he was exactly the kind of person worth keeping. And in the end, that was the truest love story of all. If this story touched your heart, subscribe and tell us where you're listening from. Because love doesn't follow rules, and the most beautiful relationships are often the ones that refuse to fit in neat boxes. Sometimes being seen by the right people is all it takes to transform from invisible to unforgettable. And sometimes the greatest love stories start with three simple words. I see you.